a lot of the time at new games, the very first things that I am trying to figure out are, like, to me, the most practical things, like, how does this character anti-air? Like,
Mm,
can I anti-air consistently with one like, maybe one button or one move and not, like, multiple moves that I have to switch around? Like,
yeah.
one simple anti-air, and then, like, what are my situations on, like, knockdown or Oki? Like,
Mm,
does my combo lead to a plus situation? Does my throw lead to a plus situation? Do I have like normals or buttons that are plus? I'm always looking for like how to structure early offense because,
okay.
in my opinion, with early games, the defense is not as important as having strong offense
Yeah, I'd agree.
because
Yeah.
you can really pressure people, and if they don't know the situations, then and they probably won't because you've figured that stuff out, and they're still like trying to learn their own character, so they probably don't know.
Hello, hello, and welcome to the Absolute Guard podcast.
Yes, welcome. This is episode 58. My name is Benny, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host John, who is 75% of the reason that our episodes are out of sequence. I say that
75%.
I say that because I'll take 25% of it because I didn't help out either. So
I I completely forgot like what episode was what and then which ones were being aired at what time. So uh yeah, that's kind of a disclaimer. We are taping this episode a week or so in advance due to my upcoming wedding in October.
yeah,
So any local events that we discuss on this episode may have already occurred.
yeah. So that's why I say it's 75% you because it's you're the one getting married. This is the reason why.
Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah. That's fair.
But
Uh,
I'll take
this
I'll take
this
some of the blame.
this whole recording things in advance thing, like we were like, oh, this would be a good idea. We'll have some in the tank so we can, for a rainy day if one of us is out on a break or something. But it's proven to be kind of a logistical scheduling issue, I think, or it's more
Yeah.
complicated than I originally thought it would be.
Agreed, agreed. That's how I thought of it too.
Okay, well, maybe we'll have a better idea of how to approach this issue with some help from a friend later.
Yeah,
Cool.
yeah. So who do we have on the show today, Joe?
So today we are bringing on Marvin, aka Kyoku236HS. Is that, do I have to pronounce all of it, or do I just say Kyoku?
You can just say Kyoku, that's fine.
Cool. What's up, Marvin?
Hey, how's it going?
Doing good, man. How about you?
Pretty good.
Cool, cool. So since this is your first episode on, typically we like to find out a little bit about you. So give us the origin of the Kyoku 236 HS. Did I get that right?
Yeah, you did. So the 236HS is a newer edition. I've been having to kind of make additions to the name because there tend to be other Kyokus in the world,
Ah,
Hmm.
especially Japanese players.
that's
And
fair.
it happened a few times in like the Street Fighter 4 days. There was actually another Kyoku who also played Bison. So we
Uh,
both played Bison in Street Fighter
Oh,
4. So when people would upload my videos from like majors, they would get us confused. So I had to do like some sort of additional like
hmm.
thing to the handle, and that's why I started going by just AIAB Kyoku.
Yeah,
okay,
for the
that makes
So
arcade
sense.
in a box. Yeah,
Arcade in a Box, yeah.
yeah.
And then we kind of just migrated from there after Arcade in the Box is no longer. I was thinking like something that is more synonymous with me, which is like anime games, and particularly I used to play Anji in the older Guilty Gears,
Right,
Hmm.
right.
and his 236 HS is his Fujin attack, which is like his infamous, well-known attack in those older games. So
It's a
Ah,
bully move, right?
it's a bully move. It's an ignorant move.
yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
So
Nice,
kind of
nice.
added that on there, and now whenever I play like Capcom games or any other games, you can kind of be like, oh, this is a guy who plays anime because he has number notations in his name.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I like that.
I
Oh,
always
that's
have to
cool.
like stop and think when I see the anime notation because I'm like, is that core
Like,
circle forward or back or
Yeah.
yeah. Gotta look
or is
down
it
at your keyboard.
or is it a Marvel thing where it's like you're hitting heavy and then then S is the launcher instead
Yeah,
of
that's
heavy
true.
slash, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's cool. Like, I mean, it's just like a qualifier for your tag, right? Like, I had that problem too. Like, when I started, I just wanted to go by Grandmaster B, and then eventually, like, it was like there's some, of course, in AZ there was another Grandmaster B that I didn't know about.
Oh
So
wow.
then I added like my gamer tag on like Xbox had the AK in it, so I was just like, you know what? I'm just gonna put that in there, and I'm gonna run with that. And anything whatever Twitter, Instagram that I use, I'm just gonna use that because that differentiates me from everybody else,
Hmm.
and it's helped out. So yeah, definitely understand doing that to your tag.
Do you think that so for AIAB, with it unfortunately not being around anymore, that necessitated the change? Now that it's a fighting game term at the end of Kyoku, do you think that you're going to ever add anything else to it or change it at all, or
I,
any other ideas?
I think I'm gonna be too lazy. Another
Ah,
Yeah,
Kyoku236HS is gonna have to come out of the woodwork. That would be the
yeah.
only way that I would consider changing it.
Then you gotta lengthen it more.
Yeah.
it's like money
No, just
matching for a color or something.
yeah. You just have to put the whole combo notation in there.
Yeah,
Oh
this is
man,
good for now.
cool. So in terms of like, I know when I think of you, like you play a multitude of fighting games, and like we like to find out kind of like your origins with that. So not from a competitive standpoint, we'll talk about that a little bit later, but just in general, like what's your origin when it comes to like fighting games, and when did that all start?
So my fighting game start and my competitive start are in a pretty similar time frame actually, because the first fighting game that I really started playing and like really liked was Guilty Gear X2 on the PS2.
Okay.
Like I had always played like Street Fighter games because I just like the aesthetic because it looks like anime to me, and I've always liked anime.
Mm,
So especially like the old Street Fighter, like Third Strike style, Street Fighter 3 art style was very anime. So I really like that. But
yeah.
I actually got into Guilty Gear X2 on such a random whim because I happened to be at a local like video game store. It was called Game Crazy.
Oh,
Mhm.
okay.
They were kind of, did you guys have Hollywood Video?
Yeah. Hollywood
So
Video and Game Crazy were bundled together,
yeah, like
right? Yeah,
they were in the building together. It was like an add-on to a Hollywood Video, which is a
they're in
rental
cahoots.
store.
Yeah.
So you could rent your games over there, but then you can go buy them from Game Crazy.
Okay.
But they had like back in the day, used to have just setups, like game setups, so you could try games or you could see a game and be like, "Oh, that looks cool. I should buy that." And one of the employees would just happen to be playing Guilty Gear X2. And I was
Oh,
like, "That game looks really cool," because it was
Oh,
like anime, it was fast, the characters were all like super over the top looking.
yeah.
And I was like, "Hey, let me play with you." And he beat me up so bad. I would later find out that he was like a good player in like the AZ scene who ended up moving
Oh,
to Phoenix, but he was like one of the like OG players that played in the arcade, and he just happened to be playing this game because it was new, like the port was new for PS2, but he was
okay.
an arcade player.
okay. So you just wanted to test it out and see how accurate it
Yeah,
was. Okay.
and so he ended up, because this place was near my house. I used to go there pretty often, and I would go every Saturday, and he would kind of like teach me stuff. So I was
Mm,
like learning little by little, like stuff about the game, and other people started noticing too. Like I wasn't the only person who got attracted to this game being out, and other people would come over, and we would all start to try to learn together. And it was kind of like casuals naturally formed, and we would have
okay.
like a casual meetup at the Game Crazy on Saturdays.
Ah,
And
Right
because it
on.
was thrown by someone who works there, it was probably that's probably why it worked out.
wow, that's pretty cool. So just
But
a bunch of fans of
Yeah,
the game kind of banded together. That's like the most
yeah,
grassroots thing
yeah,
you can
yeah.
do.
yeah,
Like the most organic thing, right? It's like, oh, you
Yeah.
guys want to play too? Cool.
and then
Like,
like
just join the party.
like through that specific thing, that's when that one guy who told me or who taught me originally was like, "Hey, they have tournaments for this in like in Phoenix." And it was at I think it was at ASU or something. It was definitely at like a college.
Mhm.
Okay.
And I was pretty young back then, so I had my mom take me. She took me all the way to Phoenix to play in this tournament with
That's
just a
awesome.
bunch of random people. But that's
Yeah,
when I first met like Scott Saber,
Yeah.
yeah.
and like a lot of those older guys, like Too Tall, like people who have been around forever. So that was really my first induction into the scene, and it was just so random.
So it was
Ah,
for Guilty Gear then. And
It was
that's
for Guilty Gear. That's what I started with. Yeah.
and were all those
oh,
guys
okay.
playing Guilty Gear at the time, or was it just because all the tournaments were kind of co-located
It was
together?
kind of like um, how like TGZ or anywhere that does like almost like a major, like you have all the
Mhm.
tournaments happening in one spot. They
Okay.
used to have like I don't know, like every it was kind of like an old school major. Like they
Okay.
would only happen maybe once or twice a year, but they were big tournaments where people would come in from out of state
Oh,
Oh wow.
and they
Okay.
would have all the games. Like Marvel 2 was there, Guilty Gear, Third Strike, all those CVS 2, every old game on the original either on original hardware or on arcade, depending on where the tournament was.
yeah.
Okay.
But
So,
yeah, like I got to meet a lot of people from out of state back then too, like Vegas players, SoCal players, and that was kind of how I got to meet a lot of those people and get some connections too.
oh, okay. Nice, nice.
Um.
So,
Oh, go ahead, Benny.
no, I was gonna say, so how was your first like that first tournament for you? Like, how'd you do? Like, how were you happy with your performance? Like how was that first outing for you?
It's funny that you mention it, like looking back on it, you know how when we have tournaments and like a little kid shows up
Yeah,
and like everyone kind of watches them because they're like, what are they gonna do? Like, are
Yeah.
they gonna be okay? And like people like cheer them on, and it's kind of like a fun like entertainment thing for everyone else, but the
yeah,
kid
yeah,
is like actually trying, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So it was kind of like that. Like I don't remember how many people were in the tournament, but I remember I got like 9 or like 11th place.
Mm,
And it was in like there was like out of state people, like all of Arizona was there. I don't know how many people that was, but I remember getting like 11th place or so.
Oh,
And
okay.
I remember one of the matches that I was playing against someone much older than me, and the crowd behind was kind of like laughing at some of the stuff that I was doing because I don't know what I'm doing. Like,
Yeah,
I'm doing
yeah.
like random supers, busting out any move that I know how to do just to do them.
Yeah,
yeah.
And I hit this guy with a random super, and I remember people laughing behind me, like, who would even do that super? And it
yeah,
worked. But like, I remember that kind of stuff. I didn't take it as like a negative thing. I just thought like,
yeah,
I mean, I
exactly.
did something that worked and they're laughing about it. But
Yeah,
thinking about it like in hindsight now, I've been there like watching the little kid now. So
yeah,
I was
yeah.
kind
So
of in
say,
that position.
They were
safe to say
laughing at
like
the
you're,
guy. They were laughing at the guy that got hit by it, right?
Probably, yeah.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's probably could have probably been one of their buddies. Like, it's safe to say, like,
Probably.
your fundamentals and stuff weren't established just yet. And it's just
Yeah.
like, I mean, you see that all the time in like the majors and stuff, whether it was like Noah back in the day, and it's just like, yeah, like you said,
Yeah.
people don't know what to do, right? It's just like, but if you have to play that person, you're like in a no-win position because it's like if you lose, everybody's just gonna rip you for losing to the kid. But if you beat him, then they're just like, man, why'd you beat up on that little kid, dude? It's like, what's wrong with you, right?
That's
Yeah,
fun.
I didn't know you jumped into tournaments at such a young age. You're like the
Yeah.
original Noah in a lot of ways,
Hey,
but anime.
anime, yeah.
Nice,
And it
nice.
helped because I actually had like the person who taught me and like the people who taught me the game were very knowledgeable. So from that very early time, I had people telling me like very specifically, this is good and this is bad type of thing. So I
Mm,
learned things like defense very early,
Okay.
which is something you probably wouldn't normally learn. Like it would be
Yeah,
like a
as a kid.
learned thing of being like just getting beat up and being like, how do you block?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But I learned a lot of stuff about just defense and like neutral, like trying to see how far buttons go and making sure that you're not being unsafe, stuff like that. I learned a lot of that really early because of that.
Wow.
I was gonna ask about the local scene there as well, or like the Game Crazy group, right? So you
Mhm,
mentioned that they told you about the Phoenix tournaments. Did
mhm.
they start going up to tournaments with you at all, or was there much of a Tucson representation at in Phoenix at those times?
So from that very first tournament that I went to, me and one other guy went up with my mom,
Okay.
and the guy who originally taught me, like I was saying, he had moved to Phoenix, so he was gone from that point. And then
Okay.
it was kind of up to me and this other guy to maintain the scene.
Mhm.
Okay.
And the scene was mostly like game crazy employees who happened to be interested in the game, and like a couple of stragglers that would come in occasionally on these Saturdays
Mhm.
because they knew we would be there.
Okay.
But it was really like a friend group scene. Like for me at least, it felt like just like a friend group. And we
Yeah,
didn't
it's
do a whole
different
lot
than
of
an
traveling.
arcade.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very interesting.
But the times we did travel a bit, like, in the years later down as, like, Devastation. Devastation actually started around that time, so we went to a lot of those early Devastation tournaments, which were happening actually at Rob's house.
Okay.
Rob,
Mhm.
the guy who throws Devastation.
Yeah.
So, I went to a lot of those tournaments, with some of the Tucson guys, but at the time, I felt like I was the only one who was really serious about the game. It was more like a fun thing, like a fun casual thing for everyone else, but I was like
Everybody's here.
really trying to learn and all this stuff.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so it was like, back at that time, so it was like was it like just phone calls, like, like people trying to meet up that way, or was it just like you said, like people just knew that things were happening like that Saturday at Game Crazy and would just kind of just show up around that time?
It kind of worked out that way actually because we had this established venue that we could use for free, and because
Mhm.
the employees were in on it, we always were clear on just doing it. So it was pretty much every Saturday whoever showed up, and that
Yeah,
was what
yes.
it was. And sometimes we would play other games because you would get burnt out on just playing Guilty Gear. We played like Third Strike or CVS2, all the games that had ports on the PS2 or like Xbox 3 or original Xbox back then.
Yeah, the original Xbox.
So, but it was actually a big detriment to me that I learned on console, and the people that I played with, even though they played on console, they were playing on stick back then, and I learned on
Mm.
pad.
Okay, I
Yeah.
So
didn't know that. Okay.
half the tournaments that I would attempt to go to, if they ended up being on arcade machines, I couldn't play.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And at that time, I was actually like, I think this is so smart now when I think about it. When I knew I was going to go to a tournament that was going to be on arcade, I would just bring like a hand camera and I would record matches of like the
Oh,
top players because I
Oh,
would want to review matches and be like, try to learn stuff from them.
yeah.
and this is before the footage was like readily available on YouTube or
Yeah, like
anything like
no
that, right?
Yeah.
YouTube or anything like that. So
Yeah.
it was not easy to get match footage.
Yeah. It's
And
Okay.
handy
like
cam stuff.
yeah. So like in some of these tournaments, we would have like really high level like Evo placing players come from Vegas or SoCal. So I would get to watch some footage from them and like even record their casuals.
Mhm.
So I would be able to take this footage of characters and then go home and study that and try to use that to get better.
Oh,
Oh,
wow. Hey,
that's
cultivate.
a recurring theme that I've heard from talking to the Tucson players. Is a lot of them have like Rock and Abe both have backgrounds, and Ernest as well, like backgrounds in checking tapes,
Hmm.
watching Japanese players, but um and I yeah, but I that's this is great. You're making your own footage instead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was funny too because there was a particular player named Ruin from Vegas, and
Yeah, Ruin.
He's a Marvel 3 player. He ended up being a Marvel 3 player.
Yeah, I
Uh,
played a lot of
Yeah.
sets with him.
and he was like the guy. He would come and win Guilty Gear. He would win Marvel 2, and he was one of those specialists like so much higher level that he could play half the cast and just beat everybody.
Mhm.
So
Okay.
I remember one time after the tournament in the arcade, I was like, "Hey, could you play like X character and like in casual so I could watch you and record you?" Because I
Yeah.
wanted to learn some different characters. So I'd be like, "Hey, could you show me how this character is supposed to play?" Because I had never seen like a Robokai or I had never seen like a Johnny or something. So he
Mhm.
would show me footage of characters essentially that I had never seen and wanted to learn. So it's very
Oh
helpful
wow.
stuff.
How did he get you that footage? Would he like send you a
Well,
link or
he no,
something,
he
or?
would play
Yeah, he would ask him to
because
play, and then
because he
Marvin
knew
would
how to
record.
play.
Oh, I
I would
see.
be like, "Do you know how to play Robokai?" And he'd be like, "Yeah, of course." And he
Yeah.
would play matches against people, beat them up, and I would record the matches and take that
Wow.
home and be like, "Now I can learn how to play Robokai."
Nice, nice. I'm guessing those tapes are probably lost somewhere now, like they're nowhere
You
being
know,
found.
they're probably super lost, but
Uh,
it would be cool to try to track them down because maybe my parents have that stuff at their house somewhere, that super old hand cam, because it was their hand camera, it wasn't even
yeah,
mine.
yeah.
Yeah,
You never
so
know. Like,
yeah,
yeah,
so they
when I
could
went to
still
my
have it.
parents' house, like, yeah, I found old videotapes because I was just like, I wonder if this is still around. And my mom's like, I have this box of stuff, and I'm like, what is this? So you never know. Might be worth checking. You might have a gold mine of OG footage and stuff to
Yeah.
show people. That'd be kind of cool if you could find it.
It's crazy because if you think about like kids that are playing fighting games now, and compare that to when you were a kid and playing fighting games, like there's a lot of differences due to the technology, but the similarities are very similar because you have a whole generation of fighting game players right now that are kind of growing up like having YouTube as an available resource to learn fighting games. So they naturally
Mhm.
learn a lot faster. So it's almost as if like you took a, yeah, like as you said, it was kind of smart in hindsight, but it's a common through line across the generations of fighting game players here, and that's pretty interesting to see.
I think it helps a lot because when I think about even like because we just had Aki come out for Street Fighter
Yeah.
6,
Right,
Yep.
yeah.
and I remember when she first came out, I'm thinking like there's no footage to look at. There's nothing to look at. So I need to go
Yeah.
like try to make stuff up on my own. But I was thinking the whole time like if there was footage, I could just look at that.
Yeah.
Yep.
But because that's generally how I learn at least
Yeah, did you go to
Yeah.
is
Twitter by accident? Like I did that. I was like, oh, I'll just look up Twitter. And I'm like, oh wait, there's nothing, probably nothing. And then I found like one or two things because people are all also racing to be the
yeah,
first, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, we just recorded an episode the other day. We were talking about that because Aki was just about to come out, and me and Benny were like, "That's cool." You know, because I want to wait a week until I can see what the character is actually going to be played like, and I don't want to have to try to guess at it myself
Yeah.
anymore.
And that's something that I've like Rock has said a lot. Like Rock is always the biggest like I'll wait a week. I'm going to let the smart people figure that out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I'll steal
Yep.
all their stuff.
Yep. That's exactly what
Um
he said when we had him on the show.
He said
like
he would remix it too.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
my thing
Yeah.
with like not trying to be figuring stuff out at the beginning is that I know if I grind it out too much, I'm going to develop bad habits with the
Wow.
Yeah.
character because I'm going to develop habits of like things that I'm trying to figure out, but you're probably not going to be the optimal things.
Wow. Yeah, that's a good point.
Got it. So you want to just start with the optimal out of the gates, so that way there's no risk of unlearning something.
Hmm.
There's no extra mental load of having to unlearn something and then risk that coming out as a habit. I get you.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I never
So
thought about it that way. Yeah, that's pretty smart.
so I mostly just do combos. When I'm learning a brand new character, I'm mostly going to try to figure out how the combos work and
Mm,
Okay.
like get the math of like how much damage things do, like to
yeah.
recognize it visually how much damage I need to do or how much meter I have in the situation. So the combos are going to be universal and you can always figure out which ones work for you. It's not always
Yeah.
about doing like the most optimal combo, but doing the one that you will always land, if
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That makes
exactly.
sense.
Yeah, yeah, that's how I am too. Because it's like playing Sim in Street Fighter Six. Like I see people use like his crouch fierce a lot, and like I have a hard time being consistent with it. So you see me use like medium. So I take I lose a little bit of damage, but this is what works for me. And like
Mhm.
and I'd rather land that consistently than to try the other thing and just be inconsistent and lose out on damage or the situation or whatever.
Exactly.
And then
Cool.
like, having those small variances in your combos and, choosing to personalize it based on what you think that you feel comfortable in trying to do in a match, that's kind of what helps develop into a personal style, because your combo
Mhm.
ender might change based on your preferences, and then it might create a completely different set of situations. um and I've come to appreciate that, like fighting games, they give a sense of that personal style because of six, where in
Yeah.
five you didn't really have a personal style because it was kind of always do this option,
Yeah.
and you know, I think a good fighting game that's fun to play allows you to express yourself in a lot of different ways,
Hmm.
and your style can actually come across, like across multiple games. And
Yeah.
we talked about X2, right? Was your first competitive game, and you've played so many other games since then. Like I can think of, if there's a fighting game that's come out, I can't think of
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
one
Street
that you
Fighter
haven't
4,
played.
Cross Tekken, like
Yeah, on the Capcom side, on the anime side, you've
yeah.
played every new version of Guilty Gear that's come out, Exerd, and then Strive as well, Persona, Blaze Blue. Did you play Blaze Blue as well?
Pretty casually, but yeah,
Okay,
I did enter tournaments, but I was never feeling like I was that good to actually try to go further with it.
okay. And how about Uni? Are you a Uni guy too?
I've dabbled in it because we have good people here in Arizona, like Squish. Did
Oh
Mm,
yeah,
he win Evo or did he get second place? He was definitely like an Evo finalist one year for Uni,
mm.
right,
and
right.
that
Yeah,
kind
I'm
of
not.
inspired me to try to pick that game up a little bit. But
Okay,
I have
Yeah,
played most like 2D games I have played at some capacity,
okay. And
including like versus games like
yeah, you've dabbled in
Marvel
Marvel
3,
3 as well. Yeah,
Marvel Infinite, Dragon Ball is kind of anime slash versus game.
yeah,
yeah. I went to double check. Like, yeah, Squish was the 2018 Uni champion.
Okay, so he did win, yeah. And
Yeah.
right after that, we had a kind of a big resurgence of Uni in Arizona
Ah. Well,
yep.
yeah. I
because
mean,
it's
that
like we
definitely
have the
definitely
Evo
helps, right?
champ here, so
Yeah.
And then
We
the
definitely have
pandemic
a.
happened.
yeah, perfect timing for a game that doesn't have rollback.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah,
Oh
so when did
man.
your so you started off with Guilty Gear X2, and then like how did you end up playing like the other games? Was it just a matter of like you just, they just happened to be where you were at, also like at the tournaments or at the casual sessions, and you just kind of like gravitated to playing those two?
So part of it had to do with like my other friends being occasionally burnt out on Guilty Gear. So in casuals, we might just play like Third Strike or CVS2, and it messes like just messing around with it a little bit. But when we
Uh-huh.
would go to these tournaments, like in the arcade or like Devastation at Rob's house, they would have like good people playing Third Strike or CVS2, and I would see these things that I would never even think you could do in these games. I remember the first time I saw at a tournament someone doing like the Dudley Third Strike combos where he's just like juggling you forever. And I'm like, how
Yeah,
can you do that in Street Fighter? Like I've never seen
yeah,
that kind of thing in Street Fighter. It looked like an anime game combo.
yeah,
And that's actually when I started trying to play Third Strike because I realized there was so much more depth to the game than just like slowly walking around and trying to like hit each other with these long range buttons.
yeah.
So, um, but the big thing, because I never really tried to play those games seriously, I was still only like entering tournaments for Guilty Gear.
Oh, okay.
It wasn't until I think it was when Guilty Gear Accent Core was out, so a few iterations from X2. Um, we had someone locally running tournaments in Tucson at a Bookman's. You guys have Bookman's now, right? It's like a
Yeah, yeah.
used discount bookstore, used
It's still
bookstore.
around.
I had
I live
never
Yeah.
in it.
heard of Bookman's until I started going to the fighting game community, and everyone's like, cause I don't think I'd even been to Tucson before until I joined the fighting game community, and they were all like, "Oh yeah, it's a Bookman's in Tucson. We've been
Yeah.
doing tournaments there for forever," and I was like,
Yeah.
"Forever." But now I know. Now I know that
They
all the
were
way back then in
super
Accent Core days.
super small and super local, but
Okay.
um, there was a local tournament or there was a local guy running like bi-weekly or monthly, like it was always be a different game. And I remember I won the Accent Core tournament, and then he was like, "Yeah, come out next time. We're gonna have Third Strike." I was like, "Okay, I can play around in Third Strike. It's for fun."
Yeah,
And when I went, I was thinking, okay, I'll win this tournament too. But
Yeah.
little did I know, would run into Rock and Blaren, who were
Mhm.
both very good players even back then. That I had never met them before. This is the first time I met either of them,
Okay.
and
Yeah,
I didn't win the tournament. I was pretty surprised. There were these good people there, and when
yeah.
I talked to them, they were like, "Yeah, we play Third Strike and we meet up sometimes on like the east side." And I was like, "Really? I've never heard about any of these people."
Yeah.
So I actually got into meeting like Abe and Rock through that moment of just having to be at a local Street Fighter 3 Third Strike tournament and being
At a
impressed that there were these
bookings.
good people there.
Yeah.
I see like the arc of the competitor here, where it's like
Yeah.
at the beginning you were talking about how you were relatively unchallenged in
Yeah.
X2 and at Guilty Gear and Accent Core and whatnot, and now then it's suddenly it's like I'm not. This might not be my game of choice, but I crave the competition, and then you see like masters of a different game that you want to try to excel at too. It's
Yeah.
like if Michael Jordan succeeded at
A
baseball, right?
baseball. Yeah.
It is kind of like that because I felt like there were people to play with and they were good. And it was a game that I just had fun playing. So
Yeah.
I was never aiming to be like the best, especially because the more I learned about particularly Third Strike, I played all bad characters in Third Strike.
Yeah.
So when I'm trying to play with like Rock and Abe playing like Akuma and Yun, and
Yeah.
I'm over here trying to play like Remy and Q and Alex, it was not. I could tell that that wasn't my game, but it was fun.
Yeah, that's exactly how I feel about Third Strike. Like, I think it's a work of art. I love it. I love watching like the parries and stuff. It's hype. And then like for me, like the character that I was comfortable playing was Remy. And like the times that I played with Scott, he's just like Remy sucks. But it's just like, but if you're comfortable playing, that's who you're comfortable playing with, then then roll with it. And at least you're having fun and trying to learn stuff. Because like, I mean, that's at the end of the day, that's all that really matters, right? Like,
Yeah, the fun
that's
is what matters.
yeah, you get like you said, you get a good group of people, and like you have fun with the game. Like, there's nothing that could beat that, really.
uh, I think a limitation for there like for the fun there is like how much time you have too. So I was curious, like, did you still play Guilty Gear during that time that you were playing Third Strike, or like were you juggling them both at the same time, or did you kind of pick one and then go?
I think the interesting thing about, in my opinion, fighting games back then, because there's no online, you can't play
Mhm.
against people.
Mhm.
So if I'm at home, the only things I can do are grind training mode, play the computer, or like trying to like set up situations for the computer recording to do stuff, like try
Mhm.
to recreate situations. So I felt like I didn't really need to play a lot of Guilty Gear without,
Okay.
like, when I was on my off time.
Yeah.
Even like games like Third Strike, like I would have more fun trying to mess around with just doing combos with like random characters than actually like trying to do anything else. So some weeks I'd be like, "Oh, I'm going to learn how to do the Necro loop in the corner, or I'm going to
Mhm.
Okay.
learn how to do this Urian combo and see if I can hit Abe with it next time." But I was never really trying to like actively learn at least Street Fighter because I don't know, I was still so much more into Guilty Gear at the time.
Ah, okay.
Um, and a big part of that actually happened because shortly after this whole thing, where I first met Abe and Rock and all them, there was the first devastation for Guilty Gear Accent Core. And this was the first Phoenix tournament that I had gone to in years, like
Yeah.
years and years that I had gone to a Phoenix tournament. And it was one of the big ones. Like Devastation was already getting bigger. We had people coming in from other states, and I ended up getting second place at that tournament
Nice.
for for Accent Core, which was not what I expected at all. Because I was just like, I can only do training mode. I can only watch Japanese footage and try to like recreate these combos and recreate this setups. And I
Mhm.
was surprisingly doing very well against people in person. So I got second at that, and that kind of fueled me even more to play Guilty Gear because there were people in Phoenix who were obviously good enough for me to not win. And
Yeah.
then even after that tournament, you kind of learn the whole like the way brackets work. Like maybe someone who could have beat me I didn't have to play them because they had a different bracket run.
Right.
Yeah.
Because there were people who were actually kind of salty after that tournament that like I got second when they were beating me in casuals afterwards, and I was like, I don't know what to
Uh,
say. But
yeah, that's
it did fuel me more to play because there were people that I could see that were at around my level, if not better. So I was
Mhm.
mostly just focusing on Guilty Gear at that time.
Okay.
Okay.
And luckily, because I was still with Abe and Rock and all them, any tournament that has Guilty Gear is also going to have Third Strike because
Yeah,
that's just how tournaments worked back then. Like if you go to a tournament, it's going to be like a huge thing where they have all the games together.
yeah.
So we would go to SoCal for like different tournaments, just driving together. And I would play Guilty Gear and they would play Third Strike and we would meet up at the end of the day type of thing.
Nice.
That's
That's
really
cool.
cool to know that like the cross game bonds were there back then as well.
Mm,
You know.
Yeah.
I,
So yeah, I was gonna say like so when I think of you as a player, like I always think of like consistency. Like I don't think I've ever been to a tournament where I felt like you did bad. Maybe you did bad on for yourself, but I don't think I've ever seen you like go at 0-2 or anything like that. And then the other thing is like at the launch of games, like you always seem to do pretty well. Like and I don't know if it's because of like character choice or something like that. So I was kind of curious, like at the start of a game or like at the launch of a game, like what do you look for in a character personally, or like what are you looking for in terms of like I guess uh how they work within the game structure, because like yeah you always seem to be like one of the top players at the very start of a scene. Like I remember that with like Street Fighter 5 with Bison, and like nobody was playing Bison that I really saw, and I was just like, dang, Marvin's playing Bison, and I remember like, just being pressured all the time, and I was just like, man, this sucks, and I was just like, he knows something, like you figured out something for yourself, so I was kind of curious about how you go about looking for like your first character.
I feel like in almost any game, I usually just pick whatever like looks cool to me. Like it's usually about like does the character look cool or do they have like a move that looks cool or
Yeah.
something like that. Um, Usually with fighting games, we get to know all the characters before the game comes out. So I could like be planning ahead of time, like, oh, this character has these moves or this character looks interesting. So I already have like a game plan of when I get in the lab, I want to figure out how does this work or how does this move work.
Mhm.
But a lot of the time at new games, the very first things that I am trying to figure out are like to me the most practical things. Like, how does this character anti-air? Like,
Mhm.
can I anti-air consistently with one like maybe one button or one move and not like multiple moves that I have to switch around? Like
Yeah.
one simple anti-air and then like what are my situations on like knockdown or oki, like
Mhm.
does my combo lead to a plus situation, does my throw lead to a plus situation, do I have like normals or buttons that are plus. I'm always looking for like how to structure early offense because
okay.
in my opinion with early games the defense is not as important as having strong offense
Yeah. I'd agree.
because
Yeah.
you can really pressure people, and if they don't know the situations then and they probably won't because you've figured that stuff out and they're still like trying to learn their own character so they probably don't know how your offense works.
Yeah.
So my big thing is always trying to figure out offense, like how does this character's offense work, what do I do on oki, do I have like a safe jump or some sort of safe setup that I can do. But it's mostly structured around offense and anti-air are my two main things when I'm trying to
Yeah.
learn a new game.
Okay,
Uh,
yeah, that makes a lot of sense because I mean, anti-airing is like, that's the fundamental basic of defense, right? Is can
Mhm.
you anti-air? Because beyond that, like, then you're thinking of like overheads and, what the other characters' mix-up options are and stuff like that, or their Oki situations. But that's more advanced stuff. But I mean, you're basically grinding it down to the basics, right? Like the anti-air, like how do I deal with just them jumping in on me? And then yeah, that's really smart of you to work towards like the offensive side because, like you said, everybody else is trying to figure that out too, right? And maybe they're not as consistent with their defensive or yeah, or they're just their defense in general. So it's like, why not take advantage of that? And well, do you know how to deal with this? Nope. Okay, well, like you said, I'm in a good Oki situation now, and I'm just gonna keep going.
Mhm. Yeah, and a big thing too is always like, depending on the game, of course, is like how much damage can I do? Like, I really grind out the combos to make sure that I can make their mistakes hurt a lot.
Mm,
Like,
Sure.
because especially in early game, people make more mistakes. So if you know your punishes, so all the punish combos like DP whiffing, DP blocking,
Yep.
even like little situations like if you get like a light hit or a medium hit, like just trying to figure out the different combos to do them kind of second nature. So then I
mm,
don't have to think about that anymore. So mostly I can think
uh,
about anti-air and then like just key neutral things.
So for like the one for the simple anti-air, right? That's like we remarked that it is a that's a good starting point, but that sounds like that's something that's been refined over the course of multiple games, and you have this checklist that you kind of built out of like what defines a good character or a character that you'd be interested in playing. And I'm curious, uh, I am curious about the final product, but I'm also curious about how you got there. So like, for example, like a simple anti-air. Can you name a character that you played where you didn't have a simple anti-air, and like how did you get to the point where you're like, I Marvin now want to play. This has to be on my checklist. That it's got to be a simple anti-air. Like what kind of put you in that direction in the first place?
Mm, I feel like anti-air is just something I've always focused on, and I think that has
mm,
to do with Guilty Gear being so fast and being so like aerial based. And I tend to play control characters. So in my
Okay.
early games of Guilty Gear, I played Axel, which now I play him again. But in the earlier games, I played Axel, which is essentially like Dalsum in Guilty Gear. So lots of long range, very committal normals, but he got a lot of reward off of anti-air. So I focused a lot on anti-air. But the thing with Axel that was different from like what I look for now, Axel has multiple anti-airs because like Dalsum, he has different normals that cover different ranges. So like straight up or like
yeah,
far out, like in the air. So
yeah,
he had to
Sure.
really predict or react to where the opponent would be, like a lot of predicting of like where they're going to be on the screen.
yeah,
And that is hard. So when I would end up switching later to characters like Faust, who has like a huge like forward punch, which is just an invincible like upper body invincible normal.
yeah.
That's like the simple version of what I wanted,
Or all
where I can,
purpose.
yeah.
Okay. Oh,
And
that makes a
now
lot of
that's
sense.
kind
Yeah,
of what I look for is that quote unquote simple anti-air versus like I think the one that people think about is like Chun Li in a lot of games
Yep.
tends to
yeah.
have like multiple anti-airs that she has to switch on the fly to, like for the
Yep.
appropriate situation,
Yep.
and that's, like, the opposite. That's the opposite of what I want.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I frequently hear that when people are complaining about Chun Li being too strong. It's that she has an anti-air for every situation, and
Yeah,
like the comeback to that is always going to be, well, now I have to know every situation,
Mhm.
and it's
yeah.
hard to react to that.
Yeah, and then
Um,
Dawson's a perfect example, like you said, right? Like, up close, like I've got the back medium punch, right? The little what I don't even know what motion that is. You got that. You got the back fierce, which is like the 45-degree angle, and then you've got air fireballs now or the arch fireballs now, but
Mm.
those hit at a weird angle, so it's just like there's areas there where somebody can kind of jump through those
Yeah.
versus like you said, like you find a character that just has kind of a uh, the one button kind of anti-air that covers everything, and it's just like it simplifies like what you have to do and what you have to think about.
Yeah. 'Cause I played Dawson in Street Fighter 4 too, and it was very
Yeah,
similar. Like the back
yeah,
medium, back roundhouse, deciding, like, can I just not anti-air in this situation?
yeah,
Or, like, do I need to slide in this situation?
yep.
And that's, like, way too many things for me to think about. I need to think about, can I anti-air? And if I can't anti-air, I'm just not gonna do anything.
Yeah,
So
so
yeah,
and you mentioned that your need to put focus on anti-air is derived from your desire to play control characters, and so I was curious about like, has there been a character in any of the games that you've played over the years that really exemplifies your favorite style of control,
there's a
with
few
respect to the
actually.
game mechanics? Yeah.
There's a few because characters like Teddy in the like Persona 4
Persona.
Arena,
Yeah.
like he was almost like the perfect thing for me because he had huge buttons that some of them were cancelable. So he had like giant Dalsum normals that could be cancelable on block. In that game, mechanically, all anti-air attacks were invincible to jump ins, and it was just one button, and they were unblockable in the air. So an opponent could not jump at you and not get anti-aired in that
Okay.
game. So, and he had a really good like crouching heavy. It was like a punching bag comes out of his mouth, and it goes really high up there, and you can't avoid that. So like, and he also had like Oki tools, and he also had items. So it's a lot of my
Yeah.
favorite things all put into a character. But
Okay.
mechanically, I really enjoy those games where like your anti-air button, they've designed that to just do that. Like it's invincible in some way
Hmm.
and maybe like unblockable or advantage if they do block it in the air. Because that's also how Dragon Ball Fighters works. The crouch heavy attacks that are your like universal anti-airs, a
Right.
little
Hmm.
blue circle pops around your character to represent invincibility. The move is invincible to air attacks, so that it was designed to be an anti-air.
Oh, that's cool.
Those
I
are
didn't know it
always
was
my
reflected
favorite
in the
things.
UI. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's cool. And I think even Street Fighter has now adopted that mindset too, and that there are moves, I believe, that are completely invincible to air attacks and are coded as
Hmm.
such.
Yeah.
Like they're
Yeah.
trying to
Yeah.
streamline it in a way that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
yeah. I think Dawson's back medium punch is like that because somebody was pointing that out to me in terms of like how to punish. I think it was Honda's headbutt or something like that. It's like yeah, it's completely invincible to that, and like that way you can throw it out, and then you can do all kinds of other stuff. And I was like, kind of opened my eyes to other ways to deal with it.
so another like narrative that I hear kind of when going through your fighting game origin story, Marvin, and a recurring theme that I see is like playing like enjoying the game competitively and then getting to the top and then kind of being at the top and not really having a lot of competition otherwise, and then having to go somewhere else for competition, whether it's talking to top players and getting footage, like recording footage of them, or uh, going to a different game altogether. And so I guess I'm curious about like how uh like what were your, I guess, coping strategies, for lack of a better phrase, or like how did you approach kind of be always being at the top of your practice groups, and like what were your ways like of getting better despite hitting a kind of a ceiling in your local scene in a world without online?
So a big thing that I did back then that I actually still try to do a lot back now, um, is that when I feel like I'm at a level that's too high for people that I'm with,
Hmm.
what I usually try to do is learn other characters in the same game because I am probably interested in other characters for one. But then not only do I get to learn more about some other character that can maybe help me with the matchup for my main character, but then I also get to teach other people and play with them at a level that maybe is more similar to theirs.
Yeah,
So I'll play a lot of secondaries with people, um, and I'll work on learning other characters, which also keeps me having fun with the game too.
yeah,
So it kind of is for all of us. It helps bring them up. It helps me stay interested, and it doesn't deter them if they're just losing all the time if I happen to be that much better.
yeah,
But I'm usually trying to help other people get stronger so that we can all play together in
yeah,
some way.
Pretty cool.
yeah. Yeah,
It's an admirable take, I think.
well, I mean, ideally, like John said, like you want your practice group to be, everybody should be at a similar level, ideally, right?
Mm,
Iron sharpens iron, that kind of thing. But I mean, you are going to run into situations, and I think John brings that up maybe from personal experience with like Street Fighter 6, because like he wallops on me like all the time, and like I'm just finally getting to the cusp to where I'm winning games, and like it's making it hard for him. And like for me, like as a personal journey, like I feel great. and like I'm sure he feels good about it too because now he's like, all right, now he's becoming a formidable opponent for me, and now I can get some really good matchup practice. Whereas before it was kind of just like combo practice for him, or does Benny know how to deal with this situation or this mix up? So yeah, that's I've seen that a lot with people in terms of like you said, like playing secondaries or something like that, and like you just hope that the people that you're playing against don't take that personally and don't
Mm.
let that kind of hit their ego because like I've seen I've had people do that in tournament to me, right? Like Latif did it at the first tournament I was here, like in 2012. Like I got to him in the tournament, and like I was ready to play as Viper because back in Alaska, my friend Shinji played Viper, and I was like, I know this matchup, and then he picked Seth, and I'm like, oh, he doesn't think I'm good enough to play his Viper, and I'm just like, and I feel like I would have had a better chance playing his Viper,
Mm.
regardless of how much better his Viper is, than to play against his Seth. But I could even beat his Seth, so I was just like, okay, fair enough. Like you would. Yeah, and and again, like I didn't take that as a hit to my ego. I was just like, okay, well, I'm not at the level to get there yet.
Mm.
For the record, my line of questioning was not about me feeling limited by our Arizona scene. I want to be very candid in that the Arizona scene has actually been giving me a lot of problems lately. I have not been able to beat a lot of people in our scene.
Yeah.
That's a testament to how strong Arizona is. And even in Street Fighter Five, I remember I thought I was hot shit at Street Fighter Five, but Marvin, you were the one to take me out at the launch tournament.
Mm.
Um,
Oh, that's right.
and we both got prizes, and
We did
I
both get
think
prizes, yeah.
yeah, you got the better prize overall though. You got like the whole season pass DLC, and I got like a collector's art book. I guess it depends on who you're talking to and
Yeah.
which one they valued more.
The art book is probably worth more now than the DLC is now.
That's
No.
true.
Oh, yeah.
It's back there, yeah. At least yeah, I could hold it. Oh
Yeah.
man.
So
But another thing that kind of made me think of is like kind of a salty situation that I had at one point where, and this is not, I'm trying to deter people from thinking this way, but I remember a long time ago in more of like the Exerd days
Yeah.
where I felt like I wasn't getting the appropriate practice from locals. And
mm,
then when I would go to a major, I would not do as well as I would want to and be like, I really wish that I could play better people.
Ooh, let's
And
unpack this one.
it's not a good way to think. And I
I have
like,
felt that so many times, and you have to fight it back,
yeah,
right?
like when you go to a tournament and lose to a character that you play against all the time, but the people that you play against may not be at that level.
Right.
yeah.
So you're losing to a matchup that you feel like I know this matchup. I play this matchup all the time, and then you lose. It's hard not to feel bad, but you have to try to remember that it's not always just about like you and like when you're trying to bring up your scene. So,
Yeah.
Yeah, and like I've seen like a gamut of reactions to that, where like some people will end up like blaming their training partner for not preparing them appropriately, when it's like, well, obviously the training partner would want to do that,
mm,
Yeah.
but there's just so much like raw emotion that comes with that loss that it gets pointed
yeah,
somewhere, you know.
Yeah.
And I think that that just seems to be like a rite of passage for top players that throughout the years that I've been in the scene, is that every time someone gets to a certain level and they eventually break free of whatever their local is, and they go and place at a higher level, and then they get walloped, and they come back and they're like, man, I wish I could get the practice. I wish I could get the practice. And it's easy to be resentful of the scene for that, for not being on your level and not giving you the practice. And again, I give you a lot of respect, Marvin, because it feels like you were in a lot of the prototypical versions of that uh, of that happening and throughout the Tucson years, where it's like, what do you do when there's nobody to practice? And you instead took a more community oriented turn, and we're like, all right, rising tide lifts all boats, you know.
Yeah.
Um, and that is the lasting philosophy, I think, that's kind of echoed in our communities today, both on the anime side and the Capcom side. So it's super cool to see.
Yeah. I mean, it's different times nowadays too. I mean, you look, we have the really strong netcode of Street Fighter Six, so it's like you can reach out to somebody from California or Vegas or somebody close by Texas and say, "Hey, can I run some sets with you?" and that's something that you couldn't do before. So it's just
Mm.
like, your ability to get better nowadays is, amplified because of, because of technology and things like that.
One thing that I wanted to bring up when you mentioned, Marvin, that you were learning multiple characters to kind of help teach, like you're learning for like learning the matchup as you play the character, but then you're also teaching your local scene. Um, do you ever? I tried that for a little bit, and I'm actually kind of trying it right now with Aki too because I am enjoying playing her, but um there are times when I'm just like, but I don't feel like I can actually apply a lot of what I'm learning with Aki to the Chun-Li versus Aki matchup. Um, do you ever feel like it's like you're only kind of getting half the equation when you're doing that, and your time is still better served practicing the specific matchup of your main versus that character, or um, is there still like some value that you can get from learning the character and playing it in their shoes? I guess.
There probably is a limit to how much you can get from, like, learning the character and playing as them, because obviously, at the end of the day, the thing that you're gonna need when you're playing your main in that matchup is, like, situational awareness and, like, reacting to, like, these maybe uncommon scenarios. Because
Right.
I feel like matches can come down to that pretty easily. Like scrambles, if you're ready for this weird scramble situation and then you react correctly and your opponent doesn't react correctly. Like you might not learn that if you're playing as Aki because you would need to be getting that reaction as Chun versus
Yes.
Aki.
Yeah.
But it like I said, like you'll gain a little bit to know like maybe her range for certain normals. They seem better when I play as Chun, but when I play as Aki, I realize they're not that good. So maybe I could take advantage of this normal or this range where other people take advantage of me when I'm playing Aki.
Okay.
Ah, okay, yeah, yeah. So you're looking at like, yeah, the
Like how your
deficiencies in the
opponent
character.
deals with you. Yeah.
Yeah,
Because then you can learn like more weaknesses for the character.
it kind of gives you an opportunity to get in like the mindset of the player that you're playing against, and then it makes them easier to predict, right? And that can
Mhm.
kind of substitute for those reactions, at least for a little bit.
Yeah,
Okay, makes sense.
yeah, yeah. The thing I always find interesting is like when you actually play against like the character that you main when you're playing like a secondary, because then like you have that knowledge of like what they're capable of doing, right? Or like even like mirror matches, like also mirror matches to me are just stupid because like I know like what he's capable of and I know what people are trying to do. So it kinds of like it's weird because like everybody throws like a lot of the traditional stuff out of the window and then you just kind of like just end up flailing and doing random stuff. Like I was playing a Dulcimer and I did like 6 roundhouse drills in a row because I was just like, he's not gonna expect this because nobody does this, right? And like it like I hit like 4 out of 6 of them because they were just like, why does he keep jumping and drilling at me? And I'm just like, you end up, kind of flailing and doing stuff like that. But yeah, I think that's a good approach to take to it in terms of like looking for the deficiencies in the character because it's easy when you're playing against them to kind of I guess overrate them in a way and just say, oh, I'm always losing to this. But then like when you literally put yourself in their shoes and you're just like, this button's not as good as it seems. Like why does everybody keep why do I keep getting beat by this, right?
I mean that's another reason why I was kind of complaining when we were taping our Aki episode yesterday, because I was like, when a new DLC character launches, it's like everybody wants to play that character, so all you're gonna do is practice the mirror, and at that point you can't get in your opponent's, you can't get in the head of an Aki player because you don't know what normals are weak or not because you're playing a mirror and they have the same weaknesses, so you don't know. Um, I just, yeah.
Yeah.
I,
That's kind of why
I want Twitter to tell me how to play the character. That's it.
That's why I don't try to go too hard on a brand new character like that because that first week is going to be like you said, it's all Aki's unless you can like break through to master really fast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're going to have to deal with the Aki army and it doesn't really feel fun to play against someone who also doesn't know how to play their character when
Yeah.
you're both trying to learn where I would rather just play an infinite amount of people playing their main and try to
Yeah.
learn.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I
So
think we
like
alluded to this on the other show, but like like an ideal situation for me is they give you a batch of characters, and then you can pick it up with a friend, and your friend is learning a new character as well, but not the same one, and then you
Yeah,
can kind of like pace off each other, you know.
yeah.
And, or at least you're playing chicken until your friend eventually gives up and is like, "No, I'm going back to my main," and then just wall up on you for a little bit. You're in the same spot anyway. um, so earlier we kind of ran through like what I called a checklist of things that you find to be really strong across different characters of games, right? And when you pick, when you choose a character at the start of a game, and that's, to me, that's half the equation. The other half of it is how that character gels with the game's mechanics. And I figure when you're exploring the character, you're also exploring the mechanics simultaneously. But as somebody that's played a ton of different games, you know, like what do you look for when you see game mechanics, and what are you? How do you identify a strong mechanic versus a mechanic that you don't think will be relevant? You don't have to worry about it, and how does that inform your character choice?
I guess it depends heavily on the game, right? Because like when I first started playing Street Fighter 6 when it first came out, one of the first things that I wanted to mess with was like the alpha counter because I was thinking that it could either be really good or really bad,
Yeah.
and it ended up being less good than I hoped it would be
It's pretty bad.
because yeah, it's not very good. But I was originally thinking, what are like the universal defensive mechanics? Because it lines up with my ideal of how I want to learn how to play, which is offense focused.
Yeah.
So if there are universal mechanics for defense, then I don't have to learn defense because I might have like a universal mechanic to save me on defense where I
Yeah.
don't have to learn about it as much. So
Yeah.
like
Oh,
the alpha counter, for example, if the alpha counter was good, then I would be able to lean even harder into defense or into offense because my defense is a mechanic in the game.
Yeah. So you're thinking
And
about like talking about like almost like the burst stuff in like in the anime games, right? Like
mhm.
that's a great defensive mechanic to get people off of you, right?
Mhm. So,
Yeah.
like, bursting or in a lot of anime games, they do have the kinda alpha counters, but they
Mm.
generally are better than
Yeah.
the one we have in 6.
Yeah.
So,
Drive reversal sucks, man.
yeah, um, so
oh,
I do usually like to check for the defensive mechanics first,
Mhm.
and then depending on the game, if there's mechanics that can help my offense be better. I know for Street Fighter 6, because everything's tried to tied to the drive mechanic, it's
Yeah.
kinda hard to learn about that when you don't wanna, like, burn out. So you don't wanna
Yeah.
overuse all these mechanics because you're gonna burn out and lose, essentially,
yeah.
but
Yeah.
then you don't wanna ignore them and then have bad habits of not using the mechanics.
Yeah.
Because I feel like even when I'm teaching people sometimes at the lower level that maybe they're not using EX moves, for example, or maybe if they're using too many EX moves, like so
Right, right.
trying to learn
That's
the drive
predictable.
system was a bit harder.
Yeah. Yeah. I think in the game's been out what 3 months now, and like that's kind of been I feel like me and John have been in kind of opposite journeys when it comes to drive meter because like for me, like initially I was super conservative. I would use it for reversal. And like my biggest deficiency was like damage output, right? Like I wasn't using drive cancel combos and punishes or just, putting out good damage to make my opponent worry about that kind of stuff, right? So I was having to win or guess, or John would say like I would have to win the guesses more often, right? Like I would have to guess correctly more often to win. Whereas he, like initially, like from what I observed, was willing to burn out and willing to expend that drive meter to take the damage and or the Oki situations, or he had like the game winning combos down because he knew like what his damage output was. And now when I observe both of us play, it's kind of like now I see
So we kind
myself
of met in the middle,
using
huh?
yeah, like yeah, exactly. So like
Yeah.
now, like I don't know if you noticed yesterday, like there was combos that I was doing that I haven't been doing like from a month ago, right? Like I was drive canceling in the
Yeah.
stuff I didn't do before, and then on the opposite end, John's kind of scaled it back. Like I don't see him burning out as much, and unless it's like winning opportunities, right? So he's kind of like being a little bit more conservative with his meter now, whereas before he was just, I'm just going to use it and whatever. I'm advantage. I got life lead, whatever. So it's kind of funny how we kind of like you said, like we kind of just met in the middle. But
Yeah. a little bit of it is reactive to how you've been playing too, where it's like, okay, now I have to think about his threat on offense, and in the past it wasn't developed enough for me to have to worry about it, and I can be like, okay, I can take the burnout, and then it's a gamble. It's a gambling game where you're like, all right, if I weather the storm, I get a full bar back. So
Yeah.
it can be worth it if you know you can weather the storm. And as your offense became more and more developed and refined, I was like, I can't weather the storm. I can't hold this. I'm gonna
Yeah.
get opened up.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Wait, so who did you play? Because I haven't had the chance to play you at all, Marvin. So who have you played in six so far?
So in 6, I after I ran through, because I had a whole list of characters that I wanted to try,
Uh
that
huh.
basically the characters that weren't in the beta. Because I did play the beta, I played all the Street Fighter 6 betas.
Okay.
Um, so I got to play those characters a decent amount, but I was really interested in DJ, who I ended up sticking with. So I mostly play DJ now.
Hmm.
And then I've learned on the side like Cammy a decent amount, and now
Oh,
I'm trying to learn. I want to learn Aki now. So,
Oh, okay.
but mainly I've been playing DJ.
okay.
A lot of that is I actually played DJ in Street Fighter 2.
Okay.
So DJ was my main in Street Fighter 2, including HD Remix, which is actually HD Remix was the revamped, redone version of Street Fighter 2, which I
Yeah.
actually played that before I started playing Street Fighter 2.
Oh,
Um, because that came out around like the Street Fighter 4 era,
yep.
Yeah.
and because that was the like quote unquote new game when we were all just playing these 10-year-old Third Strike and CVS2. Everyone played HD Remix, even if people didn't like it. We still played it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember
And
picking that up because it was like the palette cleanser before Street Fighter 4 came out,
yeah,
right?
yeah. And it
That
had serviceable online, so I played online with a lot of people back then, like in SoCal and Phoenix.
okay. I've got a social question then, because this is another kind of recurring theme, is that when you've played so many games throughout the years that you've been able to see multiple iterations of those games, and in our modern game era, whenever we switch between a new version of Street Fighter 4 to 5, 5 to 6, even 3 to 4, we see the complaints of new game bad, old game good, and you know going from, because we haven't talked a ton about X2, but going from X2 to Accent Core, or like Plus R, a decade later, or however long that was, what was the what was the reaction to new versions of the game back then, compared to how it's handled now?
It's actually really interesting, like, at least from my, like, perspective and the people that I was around, back then when we had a new, like, Guilty Gear, like, going from X2 to, Reload or Reload to Slash,
Yeah.
they didn't feel like new games as much as it felt like a balance patch.
Oh, okay.
So, like, they would add some new stuff, like maybe some new moves, but the big draw of the game was that the game was rebalanced completely. Like,
Oh.
a bigger balance patch than we would get for even, like, our 1-year Street Fighter patch.
Yeah.
So, it would basically be the refresh that people need from, like, this character needed to be nerfed, and maybe they did get nerfed, and, like, X
Mhm.
characters needed to get buffed, and they did get buffed. So, a lot of it back then felt like they were just patches, like, that you had to buy a new game, though.
Okay.
Um, so people didn't really complain back then, but I felt like people definitely did complain as soon as it went from like Guilty Gear X2 to like Exerd, because
Mm.
Exerd was an actual new game.
Okay.
Because those versions like Reload and Slash and Accent Core, they were like patches of X2. So it
Right.
still felt like the same game, even if the character were different and the move properties were a little bit different. It was still all the same system and everything.
Yeah.
But then going to Exerd, that's like your Street Fighter 3 to Street Fighter 4 to 5, where you're going to get the people complaining, new game
Yeah.
bad.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
it was very much like that for sure when new, like actual new games came out. But in the like older times, at least from my perspective, those games just felt like patches, and it was like a fun thing for most people. unless your character got nerfed, and then maybe it wasn't so fun.
That's never a good feeling.
Were there ever any instances where, like, I can think of the two ones that instances that stand out in my mind are Smash Brawl and Marvel
Mm,
Infinite, as
yeah.
games that were sequels but were so poorly received that it actually caused the community to revert back to the previous version, and then that previous version had a renaissance. In
Mhm.
any of the games that you've played over the years, has there ever been any kind of instances of that happening where people just went back and played an older version because it was quote unquote better?
Um, I don't I can't think of it too much. I know one instance was Guilty Gear Slash never came out in America.
Huh?
So it
Oh,
was very hard to get. Like if you were a console player, it was very hard to get because you need to get like a some way to jailbreak your PS2 or get like some sort of like hacked memory card or something.
To play
yeah.
region, like you
Yeah,
have to remove the region lock, right?
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Or you had to be an arcade player and be lucky enough to have an arcade copy of the game that only came out in Japan.
similar to
So,
Street Fighter 4, huh?
yeah,
Yeah.
there were a lot of people, at least around me, who played Reload still because that was what we had, and it was so hard to get Slash. Even though when I would go to tournaments, I would have to play Slash. So
Oh,
that was like it wasn't an instance where the game was so bad we didn't like it. It was mostly an instance of like it was
it's a,
too hard to get.
yeah, the accessibility then.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, that's an interesting point you bring up, John. Because like when yeah, like Infinite, like you said, and Smash Brawl were definitely situations where people went back to Melee and Marvel 3, and like you don't like I don't you don't really see that with Street Fighter. Like people kind of just move on, and then like the people that still want to play the old games, they still play the old games, but that those old games have never like overtaken the scene again, right? Like Third Strike hasn't overtaken the scene. They're just kind of their own little crowd now, right? And then four, like there's still people that love four and go back to play four, but they're not going to take over the scene over six at this point.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
And I think the five revival community is probably still, a good year out because I think everyone's still giving six a try right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah, well, they gotta
Uh,
wait for that Capcom Cup and that $1 million to get distributed, and then they'll
Yeah.
really decide, right? Like that's what I'm thinking, right? It's like I think a lot of people are just holding on to this game right now and just kind of dealing with it, and like they'll air their frustrations, but the ones that are really competitive and have a shot at that $1 million, I think they're just like, you know what, I just gotta deal with it, and then like we'll see how they feel a year from now, and depending on like what Capcom does in terms of the Capcom Cup and those events, like if it's gonna have a prize pool like that again, like if it doesn't, like how many people are going to stick around and really want to play the game? That's when we'll really find out.
There's also the idea of like what the game eventually evolves into balance wise. If we
Yeah,
look at how Street Fighter V came out, like the season one versus season two were completely different games. Obviously, that game had more development troubles, so maybe that's like a compromise on vision or something. But for six, the vision seems really, really tight, and so if all it takes is like a small, like, because Marvin, you mentioned it earlier, because everything is tied together by the same drive gauge. All you do is you change one mechanic and everything is impacted, right?
Mhm.
It's like this weird house of cards. um,
I think for Street Fighter 6, something that I'm a bit afraid of too is how much Capcom will listen
yeah,
to people,
right.
because that specifically makes me bring up original Marvel 3, Vanilla Marvel 3,
Sentinel.
Sentinel, which people complained about him so much that they nerfed him into just oblivion.
yeah,
Like tons of life to no life, which is just so strange.
Yeah.
yeah,
But that felt like a situation where I don't know if the game went on for longer, if maybe he would have balanced out,
yeah,
or if they just listened to the complaining and went too fast into changing him.
yeah. Well, I
I
don't
mean,
know. It's a kind of a weird example too because I think Vanilla Marvel 3 came out in like springtime, right? I think it's like March, and then Ultimate came out I think September, like later that year. And yeah, I was like, I don't even know like if what exactly they had planned. Like if it was just like you said, like maybe they listened too much to the community and we're just like, all right, we're gonna put out this new game regardless, and we'll just make these changes now because this is what seems to be like the community has the biggest problem with.
I mean, that's another like difference between back then and now, where like nowadays, if you have a balanced frustration or something, you can just jump on the internet and then like rage at either somebody else on a Discord or a sub forum or something, or you can rage directly at the developer. But
Yeah,
like, you know, back then, I think the splash zone was your friends. Like, if you didn't have
yeah,
a way to communicate directly with the developer, it's like, oh, this new version of this game came out. This version sucks. I don't want to play this version. Fuck this game. Then suddenly you have a contingent of Phoenix people playing hyper fighting still.
Oh
Oh
man.
man.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about the yeah, I'm trying to think. Go ahead. I lost my
Sure.
thought.
So that is something that, like, in keeping in the theme of like Marvin, how you pick up games really quickly. If we talk about balance patch frequency and Marvel 3, how it was too knee jerk. I've also heard examples of Mortal Kombat 9 being like every 3 months and being too knee jerk. But you know, we've kind of settled on like a 1 year cadence. I think being a really satisfactory one on the Street Fighter end, at least, and I think that for Tekken as well. This whole season balance thing, and I was curious about how you apply your skills of learning a new game to adjusting to a new version of the game, whether that's a new season increase or even like the slash and reload jump between those two, or I'm trying to think of other examples, like, you know, Street Fighter 4, the different versions of that.
Mm.
You know,
Even like, yeah, like certain games, they get patches like Dragon Ball or anything like that. They get frequent patches.
Yeah, so that balance patch drops, you know, and then the following day you boot the game up for the first time. Like, what's your game plan?
Well, hopefully, in a perfect world, we have the patch notes before the patch comes out. Sometimes you don't. Sometimes you don't. So I think going with the patch notes, the funny way that I look at it, I always look at other characters first. Like,
Mhm.
my main is not the first thing that I care about when I see a patch, because I'm thinking, what are these new things these other characters got? How
That you
much
have to
does that
watch out for.
yeah.
Yeah.
So especially if it looks like, wow, this is a really big buff that this character got. I need to go and see what this is like in the game. Or if there's
Mhm.
a character that I was interested in that maybe I didn't feel meshed with me or wasn't strong enough, I might go and see like, oh, these buffs seem like they were good. I'm going to go test them out and see if I'm interested in playing this character. But it also depends on what they do to my character. If I feel like it's not that bad, or if I feel like I need to like be in copium mode, that it really hit my character, I need to go and see if this is still salvageable.
Yeah.
But a lot of the time, I do want to try to look at new characters. And I don't know if it has to do with just the types of characters I've played in different games. The characters that I've played in like Street Fighter and like Exerd, Guilty Gear Exerd, they were not very lengthy on the patch notes. Like, I played the characters with a very small patch notes section. So I would always be like, new
That's
version,
disappointing.
but
Yeah.
for me, it's the same game. So I'm going to go look at some other characters and maybe see about playing a new character for fun, because
Yeah.
my character is the same character.
Yeah.
So it's an
So,
opportunity to try something new, which kind of builds off what we were talking about earlier, where even if you don't want to stick with them, you at least learn some matchup knowledge, right?
mhm.
And it's interesting that you approach it from a defensive mindset of being like, this is the stuff that I have to deal with, because I, uh, I do like note that of the like the traits of the style that you've kind of illustrated across the show today. Like, you mentioned that you want to play control, but you also want to play hyper aggressive out of the gates when the game first starts, which I think is, you know, not someone's first impression of what control is. So it's like almost like a very, very specific archetype, which I think lends itself to your anime upbringings,
Mhm.
because I think that archetype was way more prevalent. And Dulcim is a brilliant example of that archetype too. And yeah, you could call Bison control as well. So
Mhm.
it's interesting, because when you hear control, you think zoning, you think of fireball
Mhm.
characters, or you think of Guile keep away or something like, or even
Yeah.
Sim keep away, but Sim can be played a
Yeah.
completely different way.
Yeah. It's funny you bring up the thing about patch notes because It wasn't really expected, but I mean, with Aki's release today or yesterday or today,
Yes.
there
Yeah.
was patch notes for Street Fighter 6, which kind of came out of nowhere. And to be honest with you, like I looked at Dawson, I didn't even look at anybody else. So for you to say I look at everybody else and I don't look at my main, like I haven't
Yeah.
even looked at anything else, like even like the general changes or anything. I haven't even like taken a look at that. I just looked at Dawson and I was like, okay, what happened here? And I was like, okay, nothing too crazy.
It's
But like, yeah, I
interesting
gotta go
seeing the
look over
different
this.
ways, seeing the different ways we consumed that. Because yeah, and I was thinking that exact same thing when Marvin was talking. I went from the top system mechanics, then to Ryu, and then to I'm bored. I'm gonna go look at Chun. And then I got distracted and I went back to the system mechanics. I was like, wait, what did they change? Something about chip damage, and then I've compared and contrasted that with Chun Li, and I still haven't caught up on the other characters. But you're right. It's like I bet they're gonna buff a specific character, and now I'm gonna have to deal with that shit, and
So
I got
like
to be ready for it, right?
what I would say for an example, like let's imagine that we're about to have the Street Fighter 6 patch. If when
Yeah.
Yeah.
that patch notes come out, I'm gonna go look at like Lily, and then I'm gonna look at Zangief,
The
Yeah.
characters that are most likely to receive
and
buffs, right?
yeah, like I'm
Oh,
gonna look
Okay.
at these characters that are borderline good, that people complain about being bad, so it's probably
yeah.
likely they're gonna get buffs. So I need to
Yeah.
see what things these characters are gonna get because they could be the problem characters now.
Yeah.
Can you give me some examples of characters in the past games that's happened to, where it's like suddenly this character just they flipped a switch and they're fantastic?
Mm,
Hmm. That's a good question.
that is a good question.
It's easier
'Cause
for
I
me to
feel
ask it than for you to answer.
because I have to search the memory banks to try to get
Yeah, I
that
Yeah.
know.
stuff. Because like I know for anime games specifically, anime game patch notes are always crazy. Like,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
at least in the older games, like they
Yeah.
could
When I think.
flip the games just completely
Yeah.
upside down. Like
Yeah. I
literal
think of.
worst character, now the best character. Best
Yeah.
character, now the worst character.
Yeah. That's what I was gonna say. Like, that's what I think of. Like, what's the game? Blaze Blue. Like, I remember
Mm.
like the first Blaze Blue, like Arakune, and then what was that other girl? New or
Oh,
Rachel.
like
whatever that had like
new Rachel.
yeah. Yeah, those two. I remember those two, Arcuna and New. Like those were like two of
That's
the top
actually a pretty
characters
good
in that game.
example.
Yeah, and then like the next version of the game came out, and then all of a sudden they were just like, these characters aren't good anymore. And I'm just like, really? And I was just like, yeah, like they flipped the game upside down, like you said. But like I don't remember like who was good, who ended up being better in that game. But those were the two examples where I remember like the top tiers, and then they just like, flipped it on end.
Yeah, they do that a lot. I feel like in at least the older anime games, they did that a lot because maybe they were listening specifically to like people like player surveys and being like,
Yeah,
these characters are too strong. We don't like these characters. These characters are weak. We want these characters to be better.
Yeah.
yeah.
So I feel like they were doing that a lot back then in those days. So if you were in the middle of the road, you might be feeling pretty safe.
Yeah, yeah.
I could think of an example in Street Fighter V because that's the game I think I know the best. Ibuki in season 1 was a trash character, and then they changed her jump, and then in season 2 she's the best character. In my opinion, there's at least top three. At least top three.
Hmm.
Trying to think. Oh, like when they gave Bison the stand short, they made it 3 frames. That
That
was a
was a
huge
big
deal.
change.
Yeah,
Um,
and he rocketed up the tier list because of that. Just needed that one thing.
I guess you could think of like vanilla Street Fighter 5, like they really hurt Nash and Ryu. Nash specifically.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
from vanilla Street Fighter 5, Nash being like seen all over the place in all these finals, and then he just disappeared forever.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like he was a tough one because what made him good, and this is the problem, is this is what kind of ties into a lot of the conversation we've had today about like what makes a character good. It was tied to the game mechanics in that his dash was so unreactable, and then when they buffed the game, so to speak, and made it so that there was less input lag and you could react a little bit more, his dash became less powerful, and then they just outright nerfed the dash too. So like why he was good was like not really accepted by the community in a lot of ways because it's like, oh, I don't want to have to react to this, or it's something that's visually confusing and that's not fun to play against.
Yeah.
But yeah, they've kind of seemed to. Oh, another like gaming trend that I've noticed, because like you say as a control player, but also having an offensive minded play style. The games have gradually become more offensive as time has gone on. I've noticed as the defensive mechanics have reduced in potency. And so the drive reversal is a great example where like it's another instance where drive reversal mechanics or like those kind of block stun reversal mechanics are ass and not good. So like what is your opinion of that as a player that's had a style that's etched and that's found foundationally from the older games, and how do you apply that to the newer games?
Um, well, I guess one good way to look at it is that even if the mechanic is good in other games, in pretty much every game, the defensive guard like alpha counter mechanic, it always is expensive. So
Mm,
if I were to say just not have it anymore, I probably wouldn't miss it that much because it's so expensive. I don't get to use it that often.
yeah.
So in Street Fighter 6, it's not very expensive, but then it's also not good. So
Yeah.
I feel like it could either be more expensive and good, or if it was too cheap and then also good, it would feel like it's toxic or something.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. We
there
were
have been
talking
games in
about
the
that.
past where
Yeah.
Alpha Counter has done that. I think Cross
Mhm,
Tekken had a problem with Alpha Counters.
mhm. So, um, I usually I feel like I lean on a lot more like fundamentally defensive tools of just
Mm,
like fuzzy blocking or fuzzy mashing or like what I do, and this has actually been something that I've done for a long time, even like all the way back to Street Fighter 4. When I'm blocking, after I block the initial like low in a string, like if someone's pressuring me, I start holding straight back
Yep.
because they would need to put a gap in their string to make a low at that point. And if I see my characters stand up and move, I'm either getting out of throw range and then punishing their throw, or I'm going to try to see if they're going to do a low and block. Does
Yep.
that make sense?
yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
I
So,
I have been hit by that. You do like you'll block a low, you'll walk back, and then I'll whiff a throw, and you'll do crouch jab into light sobot,
mm,
right?
and
And that's a
that's been
punish
like
counter.
a habit that's kind of like on and off, good or bad, depending on the game.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I just remember like it's drilled into my mind like Abe complaining about me doing that. Like why are you walking backwards? I could hit you low.
Yeah.
And it's like it keeps working though. So I don't know what
Yeah.
to say.
Yeah,
It's
that's we call that an offensive shimmy now, or a defensive shimmy now, I think.
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And the same thing with like fuzzy mashing is something that people will get upset at you about because essentially what fuzzy mashing is, if someone doesn't know, is where you know how long the block stun for whatever you're blocking is, and you
Mm,
hit a button after that. So if they were going to create a gap, your button would come out. If they don't create a gap and it's a true block string, your button won't happen. So you
mhm,
won't get hit in theory.
yeah.
So what this does is it stops people from hitting a button. Like if you're on defense and your opponent is hitting jab and then walking forward to throw you, like if they do
Yeah.
jab jab, then your jab won't come out because you delayed your button press. But if they try to walk
Yeah.
up and throw you, your jab would come out and you'd be able to
Yeah.
counter them.
And it
Yeah.
happens a lot too, especially Street Fighter 6, where if someone is doing a light and then they want to do a medium or a heavy to try to check you like a frame trap,
Mhm.
Mhm,
if they because there's a lot of situations, if their light button say isn't plus, then you could theoretically sneak a jab in there if they don't do it perfectly.
yeah.
So, and I think it's like a decent option in Street Fighter 6, but in other games, especially anime games where things are happening so fast, when you
Yeah.
do a fuzzy mash, someone thinks you're just mashing.
Yeah,
I mean, they might think that even now in Street Fighter 6,
Yeah.
but
it's difficult for
I
spectators to see that, and they just see counter hit and they're like, oh, they got hit. He was
Yeah.
yeah,
mashing, right?
Yeah.
but even for the person you're playing against, especially if you're in like a learning environment, I've had people get angry at me for being like, "Why are you always mashing?" And
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm not mashing. I'm doing it like as a timing. And if they don't
Yeah.
understand that, that might be like a conflict of trying to help them improve because they think you don't respect them because you're just mashing
Yeah.
Yeah.
and that you're not letting them learn offense when it's your in reality, you're working on your defense by doing that technique.
And you're helping
This
them
is
refine their offense too
Yeah,
by
yeah.
finding the holes
yeah.
in it, right?
Yeah, this has been like I've never even heard that term personally, like in terms of fuzzy mashing, but I guess that's something that I do now. Like I mean, we've been talking about drive reversal in 6.2, and it's bad. Like initially, I was using that a lot, and I use it a lot less now. And I find myself, I guess, fuzzy mashing a lot because like I'm learning like where my opportunities are, right? And I'm finding myself like in the corner being a lot more successful doing that than reversaling because a lot of times I was getting baited into reversals and then just eating a big combo. So like that's something I learned today because I've never even heard that term fuzzy mashing, but I guess that's what I do. And then it's funny you talk about doing the like block the low and then walk back because I have a habit of doing that, and like it always kills me. So like to hear that you do it and like it's something that's been ingrained in you for a while, and like I've done it a lot too. And like I play somebody like Jeff, and like I eat low forwards all day as I'm walking back, and I'm just like I got to stop walking back. Like he'll
So
catch it all the time. I don't know. Maybe that's the OG in him or whatever. But like a lot of other people, they don't catch on to that. Like he notices it, and then all of a sudden, like I'm eating a low forward in a combo, and I'm just like, oh man, come on.
that's
Or John
also
catches me. Yeah, I'm doing
it,
that all the time.
it's also a unique thing about Street Fighter 6 though, where like the proximity guard in this game is so narrow that you can walk out of things in a much quicker way.
Yeah,
So if they whiff a button, then you can still walk backwards.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, I there was another point I wanted to make. You were mentioning I forget what you were mentioning.
Fuzzy.
Fuzzy guard. Yeah, yeah, I call it delay jab.
Oh,
Oh,
And
delete.
delay jab. Yeah.
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
delay jab,
Okay.
same. It's the same principle, same deal rather. And it was something that I think was it's really important to learn that because the counter to it is that they have to delay their string and leave a wider frame trap, which then
Mm,
gives you the opportunity to do a reversal jab instead, and then it opens up, it forces them to stop their offense and have to really think about it and transform it, and take a bigger
yeah.
risk in order to stop a relatively safe defensive option.
Mm.
And you can like I remember our first one of our first Street Fighter 6 sets, Marvin. I remember having like that conversation without actually having a conversation about it, where we were just playing and feeling each other out for the first time, and I could see like you were trying to like poke holes, if like find where you could poke holes in my offense and figure out exactly where the gaps were. And then
Mm.
over time, I saw you find the gaps, but then refine the punish once you actually had the gaps. Like you made the hole wider. That's a bad analogy, but you gotta say it. uh,
Oh
the
man.
conversation in a fighting game that's unspoken, and it transcends languages. Sometimes it's as
But
simple as, "Oh, that was sick, right?" Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
but that makes me think of something too because uh, talking about like fuzzy options, it makes
Yeah.
me think back to what I originally like how I originally found out doing something like that was in the old Guilty Gear,
Mhm.
where in that game when you're blocking and you could be susceptible to highs and lows. Like there were a lot more highs and lows in that type of game. So if you're thinking like like Zato Eddie, where
Mhm.
he has the shadow on you and you're blocking the shadow and you're blocking Eddie, and he could do like a low or a high during that.
Yeah.
I used to do what I called it like timed guard, where I'm guarding low for a certain amount of time, and I will automatically switch to high at the frame around the frame where an overhead would hit me. And then I'm going to
Mm.
switch back to low. So I'm trying to automatically guard a mix up without having to quote unquote react to it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've heard of that.
And I actually use that in Street Fighter 6 now with characters doing like drive rush overhead.
Mm.
So
Oh, you just go
when
high low really quickly?
So, when someone's doing a drive rush at me, I'll do low to start,
Okay.
and then I go to back on the frame that an overhead would hit me if they did it immediately, and then I go
Okay.
back to low.
Oh, okay.
Sure.
And it kind of pseudo covers the option if that's what like you have to be able to recognize this player does that because not all
Yeah, yeah.
players are even going to do overhead. Maybe they're just trying to pressure you with a mid, or maybe they're just trying to pressure you with a low, or their option is like strike throw,
Yeah, my
not
reaction
overhead
would be to
low.
go for a throw there.
So,
Yeah.
but if I'm playing against certain players or certain characters, like maybe a jury or a character that does overhead more often off of a
Yeah.
drive rush, then
Yeah.
I will fall on that option at least as an attempt to see what the player does.
Oh, okay.
So what is the counter of that you're most scared of when you're executing that
Um,
defensive trick?
a not normally timed low. So,
A fuzzy low,
like,
so to
kind of like
speak.
a fuzzy low. So,
Yeah.
okay, so
Delay low.
let's say that they do dash up like crouch light kick or dash up crouch medium kick. So maybe crouch medium kick and the overhead would hit around a similar frame.
Yeah.
But if they delayed it slightly, or if they did the crouch light kick a little early, maybe that'll get me when I'm trying to get the low or get the overhead. Or obviously, if they just do throw, I'm not looking for either of those things in that situation. So it can
And
be
Uh,
then
tricky there.
And then even on offense, you can build a fuzzy OS into that too, where if you're doing the dash up delayed medium kick, you can do dash up block delayed medium kick, and then
Hmm.
deal with them. That will OS somebody mashing jab trying to check your drive rush,
Hmm.
and then you'll block that, and then your medium kick won't come out, and you'll be safe, and you'll have data, right? Sometimes I feel
Yeah.
like it's like a card game, man. You're just playing, taking turns, throwing cards down, and seeing what's left in their hand.
yeah.
Yeah. Like you like to need to see what people like to do because I feel
Yeah.
like that's the main thing that I'm looking for when I'm playing someone I've never played before, like a
Yeah.
brand new person. I want to think my first things are, do they do something weird? Like I'm going to notice if they do something really strange, like a
Yeah.
weird timed option or just a weird option in general.
Yeah.
Because I want to log that for next time they do that, I'm ready for this weird option.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or I'm looking for, like, do they have habits on defense? Like, do they mash or do they walk backwards or do they mash throw, for example?
Yeah.
Because you want to try to basically punish them for doing the thing that they fall back on or rely on.
Yeah.
Okay. We talked about this topic a little bit with Rock all those months ago. And so like when you're trying to open somebody up by kind of throwing, because at first you're like throwing darts at the dartboard and seeing what sticks, right?
Mm.
Um, at what point do you try to, I guess, go a step ahead of them? Like if like, they, you have a move and the counter to that is a throw, right? So then the next time you do it, you do that move, you do a shimmy or something in order to bait their throw attack. Like how, what tells are you looking for on when to advance the wheel to the next phase of the guessing game?
It depends. It really depends because sometimes I feel like unpredictability can also be good. Like, instead of going ahead on the wheel, maybe make them think that the wheel doesn't move.
Okay, so you play
So
stubborn, you dig your
maybe
heels
I'll
in and do the
do
same thing over and
maybe I'll
over.
do the same thing
Yeah.
again, and that makes them think that I'm going to keep doing the same thing. So, especially if it's in a situation where you have to learn someone really fast, I might do
Yeah.
the same option twice, and the third time I'm doing the thing that beats the thing that beats that thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
So, um,
Yeah.
yeah, it's really depending on, I guess, how you want to approach the matchup.
Yeah.
Because at least for DJ, because he does so much damage on
Yeah.
like shimmy,
Yeah.
sometimes I will present the shimmy right away
Okay.
because I want them to know that that can happen. If their first instinct is the safest option, which is a throw, and I shimmy that and punish them, now they
Yeah.
know they can be punished for a ton of damage, but
Yep.
that makes
Yeah.
them more susceptible to being thrown.
And you
Yeah.
cash out early on by
Yeah.
playing again. Like you use the unknownness to your advantage, so to speak. You cash out early on and get the damage, and
Hmm.
now you can reap more of that what you sowed later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I do like to present those options, especially in tournament where maybe I'll take, like you said, like a cash out
Yeah.
because that
Hmm.
can give me an early round. Like I win the first round because of this cash out situation,
Yeah.
Yeah.
which that can even put mental damage on the person.
So
Yeah.
and
So
I know it varies from person to person in matchup, but like say you get that cash out, you open with that and it works. When do you hammer on it again?
um it really depends on the situation because sometimes like the person might react poorly to the fact that that even happened to them. So let's say you get hit by this 50% combo. Now I get
Mhm.
Oki, and now your thing is like impatience or
Mhm.
like wanting to like mash out jab or mash out something. Maybe I'll take that as this person's frustrated and I'm going to do it again.
Yeah.
I'm going to
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
so the
troll,
next
right?
time that
Yeah.
situation happens, I'm going to do that same thing again.
Yeah, I got a
Yeah.
reaction. I'm just gonna keep. I'm gonna push it, right, and see how far I
Yeah.
So
can push it. Okay.
yeah, like trying to get like those mental advantages can help a lot,
Okay.
Yeah.
in my opinion. Um, but yeah, it is hard because people react differently. Some people might get hit by that, and their thing is to now play super defensive,
Yeah.
and maybe they are not going to mash because they got hit by a lot of damage. So then you might need to either pressure them and realize that they're just blocking, or you need to start pressing to throw.
And that's the tough part, right? Because then you have to put yourself at risk in order to go for that throw, right?
Mm.
Um. Okay. We've talked about a lot of different things on the show today, as far as like history versus game theory versus mechanics. Now we're at the empathy part of it and like the emotional part of the game, right? And so my concluding question here would be, this is a question that I ask to everybody, and we actually have kind of touched on it with Fuzzy, in that it's a different answer for everybody that we ask, and so there's no wrong answers. But to you, what is footsies?
But footsies is complicated to me
Yeah.
because it's like it's not always about like range or which button goes farther, which button goes faster, because the fast button doesn't always win. It's all about the timing and the order in which they happen. And I personally have flip-flopped between which way I like to play footsies. Do I like to play like I'm the first person to hit a button, I know my button's fast, and I'm trying to hit them first, or do I want to have them whiff and hit them back?
Right.
So it's such an interesting thing that it's not about like one specific thing. It could be going second or going fast or first.
Proactive versus reactive,
Yeah,
right?
proactive versus reactive.
Okay. And then how do you marry that with your desire to play offensive control? Like, does that translate to footsies as, yeah, I want to take first action, or is it more like, yeah, I want to play whiff punish and control first and then be aggressive?
I think for me, I like to be the first one. I want to pressure with my buttons to make them want to move, because then this is going to tie back to my other thing. I'm going to pressure them with my buttons because I want them to jump.
You
and,
can single anti-air them.
and
Okay.
I can do
Yeah.
my simple anti-air.
Okay.
So
Nice. So
Yeah,
it all
DJ
comes back.
works. DJ works, right?
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Like, yeah, I didn't. Conversation's been great. Like I said, I learned some things today too. Like, if anybody says I'm mashing, I'll be like, yes, I'm mashing. I'm fuzzy mashing,
A fuzzy
and you gotta,
mashing, yeah.
yeah,
fuzzy
and you gotta
mashing.
figure it out. All right.
You'll seem very sophisticated if you say it like that. Fuzzy
Yeah.
mashing.
Yeah. So before we kind of close things out, was there anything, any shout outs you wanted to give? Like, I know you've been doing like your author stuff too. So the floor is yours.
Well, definitely shout outs to you guys for having me on the show at all. And of course, the Tucson scene, the whole Arizona scene, everybody currently in the scene, out of the scene, everybody who's ever been in the scene. And then I do actually have a book on hand.
Oh, okay.
This is my
He's
new
showing it
book.
up
I
on the
actually have
camera.
the poster in the
Oh,
background of this
yep.
as well. This is my new book that is coming out later this year at the end of the year.
Yeah.
Um,
What's the title of the book?
it's called The Sturm Awakens. It's the first book of a brand new epic fantasy, like fast-paced action type of book.
Yeah.
Wow.
We're actually going to be running a Kickstarter for it starting November 1st.
Cool.
So definitely check out like my social media or anything like that, like for Marvin North or for Kyoku236HS. I post all stuff about books on both of those social medias. So if
Okay.
you are looking for the Kickstarter link, that'll be going on there, or it is already on there.
Cool. And if possible, could you send me that link and I'll put it in the description for this video?
Yeah, I'll send it to you afterwards. And
Cool.
then lastly, of course, I want to shout out to my wife, Sarah. She's
Aw,
always been very supportive of me playing, and she's probably the reason that I still play, because
Right.
otherwise you never know if I just get tired of it, or if I
Yeah.
feel like I need to make more time for her for other things. She's always been very nice about that and being supportive, and she's actually learning to play now too. So we have it
Yep.
as a thing that's for both of us.
yeah.
So
Nice. That's awesome.
Jess and Sarah both met at Evo, and like they're very similar, and I think you and I bonded over that, and that they both are
mhm.
fundamentally they're there to support us. That's why they're
Yeah,
trying it out, but they're also making friends and having fun while they're doing it, and
yeah,
we're lucky. We're
we are
very
lucky.
lucky
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, we'll go ahead and close the show out on that then. You can find us on Twitch at twitch.tv/spiral series, YouTube at youtube.com/spiral series, and on Apple Podcasts and Spotify under Absolute Guard. Thanks, everybody, and have a good night.